and I are truly counterparts in every sense of the word. Especially, we're brothers in campus sustainability in Kentucky because brothers from another mother. We started at almost exactly the same time in 2009 in our positions, and we're first ones in our positions. Shane has a master's degree, and he has served since 2009 as the University of Kentucky's first campus sustainability officer, and he now also serves as the assistant director of the Tracy Farmer Institute for Sustainability and the Environment. And since day one with Shane, I have noticed that he's always been willing to set aside the conventional UK-UofL rivalry in favor of a more supportive and collaborative relationship. He's just been such a friend and a treasure in this work, and we wanted to honor him today for all of his contributions over the last decade plus to our sustainability initiatives. You know, it's not just been helpful to U of L, but to the whole Commonwealth, because Shane's been a lead organizer of all kinds of annual statewide gatherings for higher education sustainability staff, just to get together to exchange ideas, to inspire each other, share information, and he's hosted numerous visits and tours for us to learn from the sustainability efforts that are underway at UK that we're going to hear about more in a minute. He's also helped get me out for the Kentucky Bike Walk Summit that he co-hosted in Lexington in 2018 to recharge our statewide efforts to advance biking and walking in the Commonwealth. And most recently, just this past year, Shane's been instrumental in helping us consider going large scale in terms of solar. Both UK and U of L are interested in pursuing large scale offsite solar installations to achieve our climate action plan goals. And this team at UK have done a lot of the groundwork, legwork of researching some of those options, and have always been collaborative in sharing about that. So Kentucky would not be the same without Shane, and we always value his assistance, his sage advice, his great ideas, and his good old-fashioned Kentucky can-do spirit. And so that's why we're honoring him today with this Josh Smith Sustainability Award, handmade.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah, so it's a blend of UK U of L colors that helps make the green. And so it's really heavy. We hope you've got something you want to weigh down.
I will make it. I will bring it to you at UK. So.
I'm looking forward to that. Thank you all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So now that the introductions are out of the way, we really do want to hear from Shane for the rest of the hour. So tell us what you got, Shane.
Well, you've already heard how's my volume? Can you hear me well enough?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. The pause there made me terrified that I had once again lost audio. So please accept my heartfelt apologies on being late. I am not sure how I managed to pull that off. Brian even sent me an email that I just saw that said, "Hey, can you make that 11:45 and not 12:45?" So your fearless leaders tried very hard to make sure that I was here on time, and I managed to screw that up. So I'm really sorry for that. I'm going to leave it there. I'll figure out a way to make it up to you, Brian and Justin.
No trouble.
Let me start by saying that I'm deeply grateful to be here today to receive this thoughtful award. This is the first that I've learned of the Sullivan Award, and I think it's an amazing way to honor the collaborative spirit that has to be a part of our work with research universities and higher ed in general. I can say without hesitation that the University of Kentucky would not be where it is without the support and inspiration provided by our colleagues at the University of Louisville. And so it's truly a synergistic relationship. We've learned a tremendous amount. I've stolen, I don't know how many programs from Justin.
He's got great ones.
We have worked hard to share the successes to lift both campuses. And so I'm honored to be here today. I'm going to share some content. Let me make sure I know how to do this. I want to share my PowerPoint slides, which that didn't do it, but 1 second. I saw it. It came up and was asking me. let's see. Well, maybe if I share.
Hold on, maybe I need to make you.
No, I think it's just finding the right thing.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. If I share screen one,
There
you
you go.
all see a PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
Yep,
And then
we got you.
let me pop that open so it's full screen. That one's just black. And will it let me advance slides? Let's see. What? Wow, it doesn't have my content though. That's a little odd. And this is why you all wanted me here. Really?
It's not for PowerPoint.
Let's see.
Recovery.
What's that?
It looked like it to recover it.
Yeah, that was a different file. I'm gonna just reopen it and see if it'll do a better job of having the.
Wow.
Yeah, that's deeply disappointing.
What is
We're gonna
The power of digital.
deeply disappointing. Yeah, I mean it's about holding together. Oh yes,
That looks.
yes.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Will it advance? Yes. All right. Here we go.
Welcome to our show.
2020 has been a cultural blast furnace, causing previously unimaginable levels of change and fluidity at every level of our community across the planet. As the heat and pressure of this have started to subside, or maybe we've begun adapting to these fierce conditions, our society, at least from my perspective as a citizen of the U.S., has begun to cure and harden along unfortunately familiar partisan and dogmatic lines, despite the incredibly unfamiliar nature of this point in history. Now, this is not surprising. You know, familiar is comfortable even when it's dysfunctional. And while unsurprising, the rigid tribal positioning we are seeing does represent significant challenges to our collective ability to learn from these unprecedented times and emerge as a stronger, more unified, more resilient, and more just people. That said, I am convinced that this year will serve as a collective campfire for our society, one that we gather around to tell stories of what was, what became, and most importantly, the roles that we played. So to frame the landscape where these roles will unfold, I'd like to share the words of three leaders and thinkers who have captured and distilled the essence and gravity of this time much more eloquently than I can. First, I want to start on the topic of normal. We hear a lot about normal, return to normal, reinvented normal. Sonia Renee Taylor, founder of The Body Is Not Apology, had this to say about it. And this was back in April. We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal other than we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return to that. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. Similar thinking, Arundhati Roy, the Indian author, well known for her book, The God of Small Things, said this in the Financial Times back in June. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies, or, and this is important, we can walk through this portal lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. Finally, I've been inspired by and grateful for the leadership of Dr. Eli Capilouto, the current president of the University of Kentucky. In midsummer, with racial reckoning and demonstrations escalating in Louisville, Lexington, and around the country, and the pandemic raging, while trying to figure out how to reopen our campus, he wrote a note to our campus community with a question. He said, so there is the question for us in this time and at this place of what kind of community do we want to be? Hundreds of our colleagues are spending countless hours working in small groups and often in remote locations, planning for how we return to campus this fall. We are calling it a reinvented, safe, and normal operation. But the word safe for us must mean more than free from the transmission of this virus. How do we stop the transmission of fear, distrust, and hate? We can't eliminate hate. Some planted long ago in gardens near and far from here. They remain deeply rooted in our midst, but in reinventing our campus, we have a chance not only to create new physical paths on our campus, we have a chance to look at each other, our brothers and sisters, with fresh eyes and from different perspectives. We have a chance to redefine our community. We must take it. Very grateful for that leadership, and it's helped inform my where I invest my energy and time in sustainability. And one of the things that it has led to is asking a question of, what does this look like? What does it look like to bring fresh eyes, new voices, and different perspectives to the way that we frame and promote sustainability as an institutional value? One way that I think, one close to home way of envisioning this that's really stuck with me is the work that Representative Charles Booker has done creating the Hood to Holler organization. I think that it provides a very clear view of fresh perspectives, new voices, new collaborations. And it resonates deeply with me because I am from the hollers of Kentucky. So this organization is focused on leveraging the incredible momentum of this year toward positive change with the aim of building broader coalitions, breaking down barriers, and fueling a people-centered movement to build political power here. And I think this is critical to sustainability. The work of Hood to Holler is not just a strategy, well, it's not a strategy rooted in the hate and division of the South that we're familiar with, but in love and inclusion, which comes from Charles's being grounded in his faith. And I really like the way that I've heard him speak about bringing together new coalitions for justice, be that social justice, economic justice, or climate justice, not or, and kind of the intersection of those things. And Representative Booker speaks to this from a life lived in downtown Louisville with a deep, rich fabric of connections in what maybe you would refer to as the hood side of the geographic post that he's put in the name of this organization, Hood to Holler. Another thinker here in Kentucky by the name of Tyler Childers. He's a songwriter from Irvine, Kentucky, which is in East Kentucky, decidedly on the hood or on the holler side of the spectrum between hood and holler. And he released a song in a surprise album earlier this year called Long Violent History. And it sparked a tremendous amount of dialogue in the country music world about what it means. And he let that dialogue swirl for about 6 hours before releasing this video essay where he told you exactly what he meant by it. And he was speaking to the downtrodden, mostly white, rural, often right side of the political aisle folks in Appalachia, and who, in his words, feel seemingly outside of some of these issues happening in our urban core. One of the things he says in this 5-minute essay, which I strongly encourage you to listen to, is he says, we can start looking for ways to preserve our heritage outside of lazily defending a flag with a history steeped in racism and treason, speaking directly to those in the many rural parts of this state still flying the Confederate flag. He says things like hewing a log, carving a bowl, learning a fiddle tune, growing a garden, raising some animals, canning our food, hunting and processing the animal, fishing, blacksmithing, trapping and tanning the hide, sewing a quilt. And he says if we did things like that, things tied to true Southern heritage, and in my opinion, as a kid that grew up with my great-grandparents as my closest neighbors, that's sustainability. Those sort of like skills, and we talk about it as reskilling and resilience and local food and, understanding food systems now, but those are traditional values of those communities that have been somewhat lost. And he says if we did things like that, we'd have a lot less time for arguing about things that we may not fully understand, being fueled by news that we can't fully trust. And so, I say all that to bring us to kind of where I am with sustainability right now at UK. And for me, this year has led me to re-envision the metaphor. We use a metaphor of a triple bottom line or a three-legged stool with people, prosperity, and the planet as those three equal legs of the stool holding up sustainability. And I've just come to understand that as I'm flipping the stool upside down and saying that the base has to be social justice, and that we can build well-balanced programs that look at economics and environmental balance and even, restoration and reparation and, not just balance, but positive impacts on those. But we can really only build those on a foundation of social justice. And that's because it takes us all, it will take every aspect of our community, every member and every side to address some of these challenges, climate change in particular. But if our starting point fails to recognize the injustice and the marginalization that so many of our fellow citizens continue to experience and the historic roots that that's based in, I think that our gains are going to be nominal. And so we are in the process of, and you can see at the bottom of the screen here is kind of how we define sustainability at UK. And you can see that we use the typical language of ecologically sound, socially just, and economically viable. We're revisiting that definition now to see if it needs to be tweaked to start with socially justice, that we start from a foundation of social justice where we acknowledge, recognize, condemn, and actively start to dismantle the systems that are causing marginalization and violence toward members of our community and our neighbors and really thwarting our efforts. So that's high level. And so I'm not going to really get into too many programs that we're doing. I wanted to provide this as a high level thing because that's where I'm still operating at. The headspace that I'm at right now in 2020 for UK sustainability is one of some pretty deep introspection and realignment. And I'm not doing that in a vacuum. There's a big community working there around that. But rather than dive into individual programs, I wanted to provide today a sense of kind of where we are philosophically, and trying to take a step back, trying to show up, but step back because we're not trying to swoop any of this work, but we realize that there are some critical intersections there. One program that I will.
Hey, Shane.
Yes.
Sorry, can I just jump? This is fascinating. Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I'm a Kentucky native, and I've lived all over, but I made it back here somehow. And I do have and maybe it's just my own bias from growing up here, and I have a lot of family out in the state, in various parts. I just wonder, when you start talking about social justice as a foundation for what happens at UK, I don't know, the immediate thought was maybe some of the trustees don't agree with that. Maybe some people on the board don't agree with that. Maybe some high-level administrators don't agree with that at UK. And I know you probably don't want to get into all that stuff in detail, but I just wonder, when you start talking about flipping the stool over and having social justice as a flat, broad base, that sounds awesome. But it really sounds like it might, in some people's mind, it might be a threat to kind of business as usual and the status quo in ways that we've already seen a lot of pushback this year. I just wonder, do you get any of that, or am I just, gaslighting something here? What do you, is this a real thing that might happen in your experience?
Yes. No, you're not gaslighting on that. This, it's why I say that I am thus far inspired by the leadership that our president is showing. He is saying the right things. He's saying them directly to our board of trustees, and he's taken some steps to realign his inner circle of administrative cabinet positions with a focus on diversity and equity. And he's not just saying diversity and equity. He is using the language of systemic marginalization and harm.
Sure.
And I think that that's where you start to get into this new ground that the status quo should necessarily be nervous about, because it is going to require systemic change to address it. I mean, you can't rally from 400 years of racial, starting with slavery, actual ownership, and that level of harm toward another people because of the color of their skin or the origins of their birth. You can't rally from that with sanitized versions of what it means to value diversity and inclusion. You really do have to acknowledge that even if every person's heart flipped a switch today and nobody harbored racist feelings, the systems that are in place still marginalize and cause harm based on color of skin. And it's kind of yet to be seen how effective we can be at doing that. I don't think the university, outside of COVID, and so there's an intersection here with this pandemic response, with the racial reckoning, and what I think follows close on the heels of this, which is climate justice and climate action. There's a skill set that we are learning through our collective response to COVID that can be applied, I think, to the reparations that are necessary in some of the social fabric of our country, and then the collective action that will be necessary to address climate. And so I'm hopeful that we can make it through this election. We can make it through the public health protocols necessary to protect the public from this pandemic. And we can make it through some real change relative to some of the systems that are at the point of the spear that have to be addressed first, without kind of coming apart at the seams from a societal standpoint. I think that's yet to be seen, Brian, whether or not we can, but I'm hopeful that, I know for sure the University of Kentucky has learned how to implement systemic change quickly through our adapting to the public health situations created by COVID. Like, we've demonstrated that we can throw the old playbook out the window, the status quo be damned. We can do everything differently. And we can do that based on science and based on the advice of experts. And I think that sort of lesson, if we can hang on to it, keep it fresh, we can turn that skill and momentum towards some of these other issues. Very hopeful about that.
It sounds great for dealing. Yeah, thanks for answering that.
Yeah, I think that's all it does right now is sound great.
I think it's
we got to put action behind it.
Yeah, but it's courageous nonetheless for you to put it out there and for you to begin to formulate it as any kind of an official position. I mean, I appreciate you sharing your thinking on that.
Yeah, and I've only got one or two more slides, and then I'm happy to just open this up to discussion. The one element that I do want to mention that we're developing now that's new for us, that's tied to this, is this Wholesome platform, which started out as a blog idea because we rarely tell our stories until the program's complete and we've had some sort of launch event and it looks nice and shiny. We rarely tell the story of how these programs come to be or who's involved or why we're doing them until you present it as this finished work. And I think there's something lost in that. There's definitely a lot of engagement lost there, but there's probably something lost relative to how strong the programs end up being. And so we are leading with Wholesome as a way to inspire and inform and encourage more engagement around our sustainability efforts. And one of my favorite parts about this so far was the work to re-envision the 3 R's. I don't know how it is at U of L, but sustainability at UK still has a knee-jerk reaction with reduce, reuse, recycle. And while I appreciate that, it takes a little bit of overcoming that to get the conversation broadened out to a point that we're not just talking about materials management and operations. And so we, through the early work on Wholesome, we've kind of rebranded the 3 R's as rapport, renewal, and resiliency. And I think those align well with social justice as a foundation. So I'm excited to kind of see where that goes. And I think that's my final slide. So I'm gonna, let me see if I can stop sharing. I think I did. Did I stop sharing?
Yep.
Okay, and back here, and happy to talk about any of that or anything else you all want to talk about today.
So I'd like to ask Shane, is UK using the term anti-racist?
Trying to think what the highest level I've seen that at, Justin, is. I listened to a public radio story this morning that was focusing on the firms that used to offer, or the firms that offer diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and how much of that has been lost due to the federal threat of funding cuts if an entity that receives federal funds is found to be providing training that that espouses ideas of systemic inequities, critical race theory, anti-racism. There's like a bulleted list of these topics that they're saying, if you discuss these in your diversity and equity trainings, we're going to cut off your federal funding. To my knowledge, UK has not backed down from that yet. The gift from Dr. Kendi that the opposite of racist is not racist is some important knowledge that everybody needs to grapple with. The opposite of racist is anti-racist, and just quietly being not racist provides weight to the keel that keeps the racist systems in place. It's part of the problem. You're down in the hull, you're not up on the decks banging a spear, but you're keeping the boat afloat and heavily keeled and heading in the direction that it's always gone. So I think that it will have to be. It's part of our Office of Sustainability statement. And so the slide that showed the Black Lives Matter, love is love, no person is illegal, is a banner on our website. Click on that. We've put out a statement where we say that we're working toward being anti-racist, or that we are deeply committed to anti-racist values. We're working with partners on campus to help define what that's going to look like, what action steps we can take to that. And the first thing that we can do is put our money where our mouth is. And we operate several programs with several $100,000 a year in funding that we redistribute to the campus to promote sustainability programs. $200,000 of that goes to faculty-led teams through what we call the Sustainability Challenge Grant Program. And so the call for proposals for that program is one of the areas that we're looking at realigning our priorities. We also support some interdisciplinary faculty-led teams that are topical. They're not a project. They're scholarly learning communities that get together around a topic. But we've got somewhere around $100,000 that we use to support that work. And so the topic of sustainability and social justice, or social justice as a foundation for sustainability, is potentially a new area for a working group. And anti-racist policy deconstruction would be an idea that I would try to seed very quickly for the faculty to dive into and to provide some feedback on. So we're seeing it I think more at a departmental level, what we're seeing is a condemnation and we're seeing a recognition of systemic racism at an administrative level. But the language of anti-racist tactics hasn't been explicit yet from those same administrators, to my knowledge. It's a long, rambly answer. Sorry, Justin.
I want to invite anyone on the call to join us. And Shane, you're still sharing your screen. Don't click the leave button, but right next to it. No, not that one. Yeah, that one. Yay.
It was pretty magical. How do you know?
Not the blue pill, not the red pill.
I do have another question, but I don't want to dominate the floor if anyone else has anything.
Sure. Anyone should feel free to unmute themselves and please ask questions.
I have a question.
Great. Hi, Angela.
Hi. I'm Angela Story. I'm a assistant professor in Department of Anthropology here at UofL. Thanks for that presentation. It's great to hear more about what UK is doing. And I'm really interested in that reimagining of the 3 R's. I'm wondering if you could tell us more about how that came to be. Basically, I guess more the sort of processual piece of who came up with that, and then I guess looking forward to what you're going to do with it. I think that I like the words you've chosen, and I also think that it is an interesting way to connect in with a framework that people are already familiar with as a sustainability thing. So thanks very much.
Would it be useful for me to bring that slide back up?
If it's easy. You don't need to. You don't need to.
All right. I think it is easy.
Okay.
Is that it?
Cool. You got it.
So the team that came together for this by good fortune, but you should always take advantage of good fortune, right? The speechwriter for our president right now is a relatively recent graduate of our Environment and Sustainability Studies program. She was a member of our Student Sustainability Council, so she's somebody that I've worked with very closely. She's also one of the staff supporting the diversity, equity, and inclusion leadership team. And so she's really well positioned at this intersection of the president's office, our executive leadership, our diversity and programming, and sustainability. And so when we saw her matriculating through the system and becoming the president's speechwriter, we included her on the President's Sustainability Advisory Committee. She was one of the recommendations for new membership because we had a couple open seats. So her name is Tiana Thay. And so we brought her into this team that also included the Center for Applied Energy Research, who their communications lead was our former president's speechwriter. So we have 2 presidential speechwriters on this wholesome team, almost not totally by accident, but we just got really lucky. And so I don't think that luck, that fortune necessarily was the only reason that we came up with these concepts, but it certainly didn't hurt. And what I'm hopeful about is with Tia's work on both of these fronts, that we can simultaneously be using the same language. It can be a give and take with the president. And so what the president's saying, we can certainly leverage and borrow. We're hopeful that the reverse is true, that as we make this more robust, it can shift back over to the president. Just the process-wise just came out of a rough draft where I think it said, for me, I rejected it pretty roundly, and it was a heated conversation because the first draft was, for many, sustainability has long been about the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle. And I just kind of rejected that categorically on 2 or 3 levels, because to say that for many it had been that way, I felt like made invisible the sustainability professionals that I work with on a daily basis, who see that as a component of one side of the operational aspects of sustainability and not as the tagline for it. So it grew out of some positive tension around my the problems that I and other people had with this first draft, but that positive tension around the disagreement led to an agreement that the 3 R's are really culturally relevant and widely known. And so let's move away from the assumptions that were made in the original statements, but leverage the 3 R's. And then the rapport, renewal, and resilience. Resilience was the only one of those that was suggested by my office. Rapport and renewal came from Tia, and she just did a lot of like thesaurus work and then compared what she was seeing in the thesaurus with where we are. And renewal, we really keyed in on, because a lot of the textbook definitions of renewal reference it as occurring in the wake of interruptions. And we are certainly experiencing disruption and interruption right now. And rapport, I thought, was an excellent choice as well, because of the active listening that is implied by the word rapport. Like, you don't develop rapport by just preaching at people. You gain rapport by being present, showing up, and listening. And I think that's going to be critical to this work. I can't remember how to get back out of here. There we go. And then if I hit that button, there we go. So that's a little bit about the process. That team has about 8 people on it, Angela. And our recycling coordinator actually asked for support in the creation of a blog. And I said, so we said, we're happy to support you, but, you know, are you open to the idea of the blog being about more than materials management? And she said, oh, absolutely. And so we've tried to honor them as the catalyst for that at every chance we get, because they've been very gracious in allowing the platform to expand.
Great, thanks so much.
I want to answer the question that I know is on everybody's mind, which is, where the heck am I? Just look down at my screen. And so my wife runs a children's art studio, and it is the site of my remote office during these times. And so what you're seeing behind me is the storage area for a very engaged children's art, or a children's art studio that was very engaging and messy prior to the pandemic, but it's been all too quiet down here recently.
I have a quick question, and I hope it's quick. Just to follow up on kind of what you explicated for Angela. If you're going to pose these new R's as the new 3 R's, do you have any sensitivity to what's lost from the old 3 R's? Like, a lot of stuff is not explicit that's in the old 3 R's. And if you already know that, as you point out, they're broadly culturally known, then no big deal, I guess. But does that in any way, is there any tension around that idea? And I'm not being critical, I'm just curious. So
I haven't felt any tension yet on that idea, Brian. Our materials management efforts are firmly supported by our current sustainability strategic plan, and our recycling coordinator and our waste management team have been able to leverage resources because we got the president to sign off on a pretty ambitious diversion rate target. And so that diversion rate target has driven some programmatic and operational decision making for them in a way that they're really grateful for. And so I think they see the partnership as very mutually beneficial. And we will certainly continue to talk about reduce, reuse, recycle, and, you know, the Berkeley Center's elaboration of that, which has about 15 R's. That if it can't be reduced, reused, recycled, then it needs to be reimagined, reinvented, redesigned, or rejected. That mantra will still stay with us relative to our materials management team. So short answer, no. I think that while there is the potential for that tension, they certainly didn't see that an important tool was being co-opted, I don't think. Justin, you've raised a virtual hand.
I did.
He saw it. He can see it.
So if I could ask one last question, I know we're running out of time, but sadly, the the racism in our Commonwealth runs even deeper historically than slavery. And the erasure of indigenous peoples in Kentucky has always struck, coming here from Wisconsin, has always struck me as particularly thorough. It's the white people in Kentucky have literally told me, oh, there were no indigenous people here. It was just a hunting ground. So we tell ourselves, this myth that we didn't actually cause genocide and full erasure of indigenous peoples in Kentucky. And so, how is UK addressing that? Have you all thought about a land acknowledgement? That's one thing I'm wrestling with right now, working on. I've got a draft one up on our sustainability site. I haven't tried to get it adopted by the university in any way, but I wonder if that's something you all have discussed at UK.
Nice.
Yes. And Angela, I'm a cultural anthropology undergraduate student. And so it's part of my academic background. And so I couldn't agree with you more, Justin, that the myth of the dark and bloody ground and it being, a pass-through zone is really harmful. One of the members of the team that's working on looking at our definition of sustainability is an associate dean of education and a longtime ally. I got an email from her last year, and her email had a land acknowledgement statement in the signature that was specific to the University of Kentucky. And I had been touched by the very active role of Native peoples when I've traveled, particularly to the Pacific Northwest. Conferences in Portland, conferences in Seattle, conferences in BC start with Native people saying, welcome, but you should know these are our lands and we never gave them up. Yeah. And, that space, creating space for those leaders to say, we're glad you're here, but you need to know this, really stuck with me. So I came back from, I think that was a walk bike summit that was in Vancouver. Came back from that really deeply curious about the work going on at UK. And I had friends in the archaeology department, and so I started there. And while they have done a great job of trying to refute the myth of residency in traditional lands, they've done it in a way that has been mostly relegated to peer-reviewed journals. It hasn't made it into popular conscious. Not to disparage them, it's kind of the field, but it just didn't seem to have crossed that void. So when I got Margaret's email and saw the land acknowledgement statement, I quickly called her and asked her where it came from, and she said they had a committee that had been working toward the university adopting it for some time, and then they bumped up against some roadblock in the adoption, and I don't know what that roadblock was, but this group of 20 administrators just said, okay, roadblock be damned, we're going to start using it. And I said, well, is it okay if I do? And so they said yes, and so I've added it to mine. And then the ASHE conference last week was very keyed in on the topic and going deeper than just, a land acknowledgement statement is one thing. You having that not be performative and taking action that recognizes this through symposia, through lectures, through scholarship is also a responsibility of the university. And I thought it was interesting too that I've seen the idea that a land and labor acknowledgement, that you combine those two, and you talk about these universities have been built on traditional lands of Native peoples by indentured servants and slave labor a lot of times. And so this deeply violent history, deeply flawed history, I think has to be acknowledged to be able to move forward. You can't just sweep it under the rug because it keeps showing up in a bunch of different ways. If you do, even if you don't mean for it to show up, it shows up. If you acknowledge it, then you can kind of see it snaking its way around and infusing different things. I look at the naming of our buildings. I mean, I think we've got 3 of our 500 buildings are named after African Americans. And many of our buildings sit on neighborhoods that used to be primarily BIPOC neighborhoods. And there's no historical markers to what was lost to build Memorial Coliseum. You know, we lost a whole neighborhood, a campus to that. So there's a lot of work to be done. We don't have an official statement on it yet, but I was encouraged earlier this year to find a community of scholars and practitioners that have a deep interest in it. And so I'm hopeful that it needs to be part of this reimagining a new normal. You know, I think Sonia Taylor's words about normal never was. We normalized some really bad shit. We should not try hard to get back to all of it. We should leave some of it behind us if we can. And I think the just oblivion that most of colonial America walks around in relative to Native peoples is one of the things that we never need to go back to. I think we should start calling us colonial Americans too. You know, I think we need a prefix. You know, if every other type of American gets a prefix, then your European colonizer genociders, like, we need one too. Like, we need to be referred to as colonial Americans.
And I don't know if there's a better way to end than that. We really appreciate you taking your strong positions here in our EcoReps meeting, Shane, because we certainly need those, and we certainly support all of the activism that you're suggesting, and really glad that you're sharing so much of your thinking at UK with us and generally, right? So once again, the 2020 Josh Smith Sustainability Memorial Award winner, Shane Tedder from UK, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come out and talk with us today.
Brian, if I could give you 20 more seconds, I wanted to say that in addition to being deeply humbled by the award, I was blown away that there was a cash prize that went with it. And so I wanted to let everybody involved in the selection of that know that that cash prize, thanks to your invitation, that cash prize went directly to Hood to Holler, to Charles Booker's foundation. We just bypassed me, and you all were able to give it directly to them. So I really appreciate that. And this is the second time this year that an invitation from Justin has given me an opportunity to distill some thinking. And so I'm also deeply grateful for that. He invited me to his radio show early in the pandemic, and it gave me an opportunity to think higher level about some of the pieces I was grappling with. And this did too. And my favorite part of the thinking that I did in preparing for today was seeing this connection between Tyler's work and Representative Booker's work, because they're looking at the same place from two very different places and surrounded by two very different communities. And I think there's an opportunity to get those two people on a stage together that could really have some interesting dialogue as you get into the practicalities of how do you break down barriers of upbringing and geography. I mean, if you've got a alt country music superstar and a state representative from downtown Louisville that can see the same place but have lived such different lives, I think there's something to be done there, and I would love to collaborate with you all to bring those two folks together for something maybe in the spring where we get into a little bit. And I think both of them, sorry, and this is longer than 20 seconds, both of them have an idea of sustainability before it was called that. And so, you know, sustainability, for what we understand it relative to social justice, is the African American led freedom movement, is the recognition of the oblivion about Native peoples. Like, we're calling it sustainability now, which we need to be careful about. But then from Tyler's perspective, that Southern heritage of know-how and resilience and land-based economies, that's sustainability too. And so I think I would love to help organize a conversation between those two people.
Neat. Well, we'll have to follow up on that, Shane. And if anybody's interested in being part of that with Shane, I'm sure we can reach out to you directly through UK's website. Is that the best move?
For sure. And I'll send the slide deck over so you all can share those. If it looks like this is being recorded as well, so if you share the recording, feel free to share the slides. I'll link. The slides are full of hyperlinks too, so a lot of the stuff that I mentioned is you can do deeper dives from the slides.
Well, thanks for all that, and thanks for continuing to help educate us. As we go back and review this material, giving us some options for deeper stuff. So, once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's Shane Tedder, and you can access Shane's interview with Justin Mogg on his show Sustainability Now through SoundCloud. Go to Forward Radio, and then you'll find Sustainability Now. And Shane's interview is actually one of the more popular episodes, right. So the metrics say. So a lot of people care about that one. And thanks to everybody for coming to the EcoReps meeting this month. We will have Louisville Community Grocery next month. Shane, you're welcome to join us if you'd like. The last
I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'll be on time. I promise.
Pop in anytime. All right, thanks everybody. Take care, Shane.
Bye, friends.